Hello again, this is David Itel coming to you with another video about the Safe and Effective Staffing Guide. In this video, we're going to be talking about the data entry process associated with our Excel workbooks. Now, this is where things kind of maybe get more complex or where the rubber meets the road. Do your best to maybe follow along with me with either your own Excel spreadsheets or some fake data that you have. Let's get started. So in our Excel spreadsheets that we have opened up here, we're going to be looking at the hospital inpatient workbook. Now, all of our Excel spreadsheets are designed in the exact same way. They just have different activity codes inputted into them. So the function that we're going to use in this video is the same whether you're doing pulmonary function, blood gases, or inpatient care. Now, you might be thinking, well, our department does inpatient care and pulmonary function and blood gases and maybe even some EKGs. How do I combine them? Well, we can have you use each of the different spreadsheets with the subspecialties, or you can kind of combine them in your own custom method to design a spreadsheet that works specifically for you, which would be great. All of our Excel spreadsheets will come with this overview sheet that kind of reviews what the different sheets are for, how things are designed and color coded, and then of course a set of instructions. Don't get too hasty because some people will end up in the data entry and calculations page, which is not what we're going to focus on just yet. You'll see as some of our fields are pre-calculated or have different formatting to tell you that you're missing data, which means you need to do something before you can actually get your output. We're going to go directly into the clinical activities tab, which is the second or the third sheet on our Excel spreadsheets. So, let me scroll back up here, there's quite a few activity codes to review. Each of our spreadsheets is designed again with a header that includes some information about the spreadsheet, some notes, and of course a little bit of education on how time standards and clinical activities work. If you're unfamiliar with that, again, please read the guide and some of its sub materials as well as checking out some of our other videos. Time standards is a core thing to understand, and how we input data affects the time standards that we're measuring. In this data input, let's pretend that we're covering a single 12-hour shift. We want to know if the last 12 hours of clinical work that an RT worked in a community hospital was productive. But don't think that this is only limited to just a 12-hour shift. It can be used day, night shift, whole weeks, months. It can even be a custom period of time of maybe 10 or 15 days. You could even use these sheets to input information for maybe particular RTs or floors to determine if productivity is managed differently based on the floor, geographical location, or staff members you're working with. What you're going to see here is that in our part 1, we have our clinical activity time standards for all of our basic in-hospital activities. So we start off clearly with our assessments, subsequent assessments, and tracheostomy tube change. Again, all of these reflect in the guide's core materials. You'll see that each one of our activities includes an activity ID number. That's really valuable when you're trying to work with CPT, DRG, and other coding systems, as well as the statistical analyses that are associated with our products. You'll also see that we break down each of our activities into an adult, pediatric, and neonatal activity group. That's important. So some of you may be familiar with doing an activity on a newborn or a pediatric can take a drastically different amount of time as compared to an adult. For the most part, it may be similar, but we've done the statistical analysis to determine that. And you might be thinking, again, where do we get these numbers? How do we know that these time standards are accurate, they're relevant? How do we know they're even representative of our hospital? Well, hopefully your hospital participated in our Safe and Effective Staffing Guide survey. We surveyed over 300 hospitals across the nation, asked them to give us the time standards or the amount of time that they spent on different clinical activities, and we came up with these numbers. The statistical analysis is included with the guide. I think it's available in the premium edition. And it does show you kind of the different, not only statistical analyses, but the volumes that we got in our responses. So you can be assured that the data is fairly clean and up to date. So let's keep going. you'll see that in each one of our activities, as well as the code and the adult, pediatric, and neonatal settings, we have our input fields. Now, these yellow fields are where data is to be entered. And the data is pretty simple. How many times was this activity done in the window that you are measuring? So, for instance, again, we're doing a 12-hour clinical shift, just one RT on board. Let's say that this RT did, 12 initial patient assessments. This would be maybe patients that came out of the OR or new admits in the ED, but a patient assessment that included an evaluation and other work. But that's not all they did throughout their shift. They're also going to do, we'll steer away from the critical care areas for the moment and scroll down to some more rudimentary care. But you can see as we scroll, we have a lot of different activities, including all of the different modalities in different types of settings. For instance, small volume nebulizer treatment, very simple. We'll put a few there. We'll say we had 12 initial assessments, and throughout the day, Q4, maybe on 5 patients, we'll say we had 15 small volume nebulizer treatments. We'll do a good 3 MDI treatments. We're not going to do any sputum inductions. Oh, those are never fun. Let's scroll down here and find, bedside spirometry, one of my favorites. Let's say we did one of those. So, you'll see that you really just have to input the volume of the activities that you're conducting. We have EKGs. We have really, if you scroll down here, you're going to find a nearly endless amount of clinical activities. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll find that sometimes you do things that either aren't within a time standard, meaning we haven't already measured this or have a standard for it, and it's something that maybe is unique to your hospital, something like research enrollment. Let's pretend for a moment that in this hospital we're doing some research enrollment for a pulmonary study. If we know how many times we've done that throughout the day, we also can put in how long that takes us, and we'll get credit for that. We'll say we enrolled one patient, and it took us 65 minutes to enroll them. With all the paperwork and all the chart review, it could take that long. Now, on the sheet 2, the number 2, which is labeled clinical activities, which you can see down here, is where we really have the bulk of our clinical work that we do in the inpatient environment. This is also a good idea if you're reviewing this and you're finding, we could be doing stuff like participating in multidisciplinary rounds, or maybe our RT should be doing more blood gas testing or EKGs, or I don't know about bedside spirometries. But this sometimes can give you an idea of really what is happening clinically in your area. Trending that data over time, or having a large pool to review can really help with data analysis and operations. But we won't get too deep in that today. One thing we can all agree on is that the clinical activities is only one side of the clinical coin. When we do any sort of activity, PFTs, ventilators, medication, there's a huge amount of clinical support work that is required on the other end. Stuff like, equipment setup, calibration, stocking, education, stuff like that has to be done. Especially if you're in a small rural hospital. Maybe you're doing calibration of your EKG machines, or maybe even your code cards. And that information needs to be measured. We really need to be measuring everything that clinical RTs do, because we don't want any of that clinical value to go unrepresented. So we have a third sheet, the clinical support activity sheet. Now you can see this sheet is designed almost exactly like the other clinical activity sheet. It's exactly the way it's designed. It has our overview and it has our input fields. But you'll notice again that we have just a little bit different here. We have equipment, supplies, inventory, management and supervisor activities. Stuff like report and community, equipment evaluation or purchasing. This is the stuff that we do that takes our time, that doesn't always have that RVU value or clinical value added to it. So again, let's pretend it's our 12-hour shift, and we should always be calibrating our equipment maybe once every 24 hours. Let's say we calibrated 4 devices, and it's about 20 minutes of calibration. Let's also say that we had to do some cleaning or some teardowns. We'll do 5 cleanings, yep, at 5 minutes of cleaning. Totally fine. There's our restocking of a CPR cart. That may fall under your responsibilities. We'll do one of those. It's always the ED, isn't it? And we'll say 25 minutes for that. Had to go to pharmacy and get some medication, stuff like that. You can see again, we're just trying to represent the work, the clinical activity that's being done, so that we can make sure that every ounce of clinical value is being measured, because it's almost certain that every ounce of clinical expense is being measured. With timekeeping, hours, sophisticated accounting software, it's very easy for organizations to measure expense, but sometimes the value can be missed with charting errors, time delays, whatever system you use, if there's an EMR or an electronic medical record or not. That's again where these spreadsheets come into play, and some of the stuff we discuss in the greater kind of conversation about the guide and the SESG. So now that we have our data entered, we do have the ability to come over here and look at our data entry and calculations. We can see here that based on the activities being conducted, we have 9.7 hours of clinical work and 2.17 hours of clinical support. Oh, sorry, I just realized I'm not zoomed in here. There we go. And that's really what the output is when you implement all of the clinical activity data. So again, in this episode, we really wanted to focus on how to input the data you need to figure out that clinical value. In the next episode, we'll talk about how to determine that expense and really what we're looking at with the calculations of the guide and these workbooks. So I hope you found this valuable, and I hope we see you in the next one. As always, my name is David Eitel, and I'll see you later.